Technology.
Yes.
So, thank you for the introduction. Like you had mentioned, we're going to be covering safeguarding against sexual grooming. My name is Allie Hopper. I am the president and co-founder of Guard Against Trafficking. I authored Florida's first anti-grooming bill and helped pass similar laws in multiple states since then. I am the president and co-founder of Guard Against Trafficking, a nonprofit founded to combat exploitation through innovative research, education, and advocacy. Testified before the U.S. Congress on November 19th, 2024, to the Committee on Homeland Security about child trafficking and the Unaccompanied Children program. I am an internationally recognized expert on human trafficking, and Dr. Sadulski and I have conducted on the ground human trafficking research across the United States and Central America and South America to gain a deeper understanding of trafficking. So that's a little bit about me. Today, we're going to be covering the definition and stages of grooming, online grooming, legal and policy framework, red flags and signs, and prevention and protection strategies. So when we talk about grooming, the term has been used throughout history in a variety of ways. Some of the ways is when it comes to personal hygiene, um, grooming for the career that you would like, or even grooming as it pertains to our pets. But that's not the type of grooming that we're going to be discussing today. Today, we are going to be covering child sexual grooming. And this is a deceptive process by which a would-be abuser, prior to the commission of sexual abuse, selects a victim, gains access to and isolates that minor, develops trust with the minor and often other adults in the minor's life, and desensitizes the minor to sexual content and physical contact. So they often start in a position of trust or authority over the victim, thereby creating a connection or a relationship. And it's through this relationship that the groomer is able to assert undue influence, emotional distress, and manipulation to control the victim. Then they start to establish a pattern of behavior. An example of this would be the difference between stealing, robbery, using a threat or weapon through force versus civil theft, like embezzlement, where a criminal takes advantage of their position of trust or authority to steal. I created this graphic to establish the compare and contrast differences between sexual grooming, sexual assault, and sex trafficking, basically how they differentiate and how they often relate and overlap. With sexual grooming, it involves building a relationship to manipulate, control, isolate, and abuse their victims emotionally and eventually physically and sexually. This can overlap, although it is different from sexual assault, where sexual activity is where consent is not or cannot be given. And this can also overlap into sex trafficking, where a sexual assault takes place, a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion. And it is generally in exchange for something of value. Polaris reports on a 9-year study that less than 10% of children enter human trafficking through abduction. More than 90% are actually lured into the life. I also created this graphic to show the downward spiral of how grooming often leads to further nefarious activity. Often it starts with grooming, like we addressed, building that relationship, isolating the victim, abusing them emotionally, physically, and later sexually. So then it leads to that stage 2 of sexual abuse with a child where consent is not or cannot be given. Sexual acts can include penetration, creation of pornographic images, sexual touching, or non-contact acts such as exposure or voyeurism. Stage 3 is sexual exploitation of the child. Stage 4 is commercial sexual exploitation of a child, and 5 is sex trafficking. Understanding the stages of grooming is really important. While grooming can happen in a variety of ways, most sexual predators use grooming patterns. Grooming generally doesn't happen overnight, and there are red flags along the way. Stages of grooming often look like stage 1 of child selection, stage 2, where they gain trust and information. So to take a step back, stage 1, a child within the adult's in sphere of influence, where a relationship of authority has already been or can be established. This could include a teacher and student, a coach and player, etc. The reasons vary on why specific children become targets. Example, attraction, ease of access, or perceived vulnerabilities of that child. So 2, you gain the trust and information. That is actively befriending that child and or their parents to establish that trust and acquire personal details about that child. The predator could loiter in places that children frequent. They can befriend other children. They can become a caretaker or take jobs that participate in child-friendly activity. Number 3 is you're filling a need or void. You're providing advice, special attention, offering gifts, sharing secrets with the child, depending on what the child appears to lack.
We'll take the trash out.
Number 4, isolate. Finding ways to be alone with the child, like babysitting, after school activities, sports, offer transportation, or do other favors for them or their parents that would allow them to be alone with the child. Number 5, normalizing abusive behavior and desensitizing sexual touch. You're increasing that physical contact to prepare and desensitize the child for sexual contact, like texting, emailing, social media, physical touching that increases in frequency or severity. Number 6, maintain control or power. And this can happen using different tactics, guilt, threats, manipulation, normalizing the behavior. You're trying to maintain that control and that secrecy around this relationship. So expanding a little bit on stage 3, filling that need or void, it's really important to understand that this pyramid is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is the same needs that a predator will work to identify what needs are absent and what voids exist or are perceived to exist by the child. They then work to fill that need or void, securing trust and establishing a basic foundation for a relationship to transpire over time. So, with this example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the base is the largest need and void that could be filled. So, if you have a child that is in lack of food, water, warmth, rest, that would be a easier need, more immediate need to fill. As you go up, the needs get smaller and smaller, but they are also that much harder to notice and address within a child. When you start to get to self-esteem, their self-respect, their status, identifying things like the love and belonging that they feel within family, friends, for the older children, intimacy, older minors. So as you get higher, those are the needs that can be and have been exploited by predators that are often harder to notice in a child. I have a quick video here.
How did you get them alone?
From a predator interviewed, Jack Reynolds. And we'll just quickly go over and listen to what he says out of his own experience.
Grooming. I would check out their family situation. I would check out their clothing to see how well they were, financially. I would check out their social interaction with other kids. When we were on the ballparks or on the gym floor, I would make sure which ones I wanted to molest. I would give them special attention, congratulate them, talk to them when I know that I would never be allowed to talk to anybody else. Aside from everybody, I would give them the attention that an official is not supposed to give anybody. And it made them feel like, wow, he's paying me attention. It is a direct form of grooming.
Were there certain characteristics that you looked for in children before molesting them?
In children, yes, but more I also looked at their families. If I thought the father was a threat, I would not approach the child. If I thought that the child had friends that he would tell, I would not approach him. If I thought the child had friends that were in the same capacity he was, I would approach him. For the simple fact that if I could molest him, I could lure him into believing, grooming him into believing that he would enjoy it. And therefore, I could manipulate him into having his other friends come and be molested by me as well.
So perhaps a child that doesn't really have a whole lot of friends, maybe not really a strong family, things like that.
Yes, no spiritual values, weak in education, needs help in many ways, even from split parenting, has a mother who may be having problems with the family, well, here comes superhero in to help out, wow, well, thank you very much. No problem. You ever need me to take them away for the night so you can have a night out? No problem. It works.
I'm thinking about starting to run on the treadmill again. I need to.
So this was straight out of a predator's mouth, one that was arrested for grooming and sexually assaulting numerous minor boys. And he outlines and highlights the very things that we covered on the stages of grooming and identifying that need or void. The other thing that he highlights is identifying that need or void that he may have perceived or observed from the adults that are also around the children. He mentioned specifically that if there's a strong parental figure, if there's a strong male figure, that's a deterrent. Now, that's not going to immediately exclude that child, but it is a strong deterrent for these predators to choose and select that victim in that process. The next item that we're going to cover is online grooming. We did discuss a bit of this last speaker series on sextortion and online grooming. So we will briefly cover for those that did not tune into the last speaker session. Online grooming can occur via platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Discord, and online games. Groomers often exploit the anonymity and reach of the internet. Some of the common tactics are flattery and attention, likes, compliments, promises of friendship, love, or gifts. It often comes with fake profiles or catfishing images, an image of an individual that is not reflective of who they are actually talking to. This could also pertain to their age as well, their age, location, their gender. Gradual introduction of sexual content and manipulation through threats or blackmail, which is that sextortion piece. The third item we're going to be discussing is the legal and policy framework. Now, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I did highlight in the beginning of the presentation that I was the author of the anti-grooming bill here in Florida. What we did was to help prevent rape and sexual molestation of children. We realized that those grooming behaviors must be identified before the sexual assault of a child occurs. You need to address these behaviors as a conditioning of a child through a premeditated course of action where the result is to rape and or sexually molest the child, and it needs to be recognized by each state as a crime within itself. The problem is you have the difference between direct and indirect laws. Statutes are considered direct laws if the crime is an offense that can justify an arrest. Crimes like indecent exposure. But statutes are considered indirect if the statute can only be decided or enforced through the prosecution process by a jury and or court as an additional condition to a current offense. An indirect statute cannot be considered by law enforcement as cause for arrest. That would be like a subsection of a statute or a conditional limitation. A conditional limitation is where language within a statute is only recognized when specific conditions are applied. For example, the crime of sexual exploitation of a minor includes child grooming language, but only under the condition that the offender knows that such conduct will be photographed or part of a live performance. So that is a conditional limitation that the child grooming language exists. However, the limitation is the photographing or the live performance. Here is an example of conditional limitations that we examined when we were examining the grooming bill as it relates to Florida's criminal code. There were numerous crimes outlined in the criminal code. So the title was included, the section title, and we went in and highlighted what the limitation was. So when we were working with the legislature, this is how we were communicating that a bill on this subject was needed. Lewdness, indecent exposure is a great example. The section title is offenses against students by authority figures, but the limitation was that it was the location of offense, limiting school. So that wouldn't outlaw or make illegal grooming behavior outside of a school environment. The Grooming Offenses Act was to define unlawful grooming and align the criminal acts with the criminal intent to lead to a felony charge. What it focused on was the undue influence on a minor for sexual gratification of a criminal. And what it needed to do was it needed to safeguard and protect children from grooming before sexual indoctrination or assault occurred. And after initial review of the statutes, we concluded that there was not one place or statute to find all relevant information or elements of the crime of committing unlawful grooming. Why this is important is not only did we look at the criminal code to examine if there was language to cover grooming, we also had to take an opportunity to explain what grooming was, how it could extend beyond the statutes that were currently in law, how it differed from sexual assault, how it differed from sex trafficking, how it preceded luring and enticing. So we needed to take an opportunity to explain to lawmakers and the general public really what grooming was. And we did get that bill passed. and did get it passed in a couple of other states. It is going through the legislative process right now in some other states. But Dr. Sadulski and I did find out a few weeks ago that the law enforcement officers in our state were closely watching this bill, and they were aware of its effective date because one of the officers informed us, or one of the detectives informed us, that 3 days after the bill became effective, they arrested a John, 39 years old, that was sexting a 15-year-old student. And they were able to get him under grooming and a few other charges. And we have also been informed that they have been using this piece of legislation to get predators and bad actors off the streets before sexual assault occurs. The next stage is understanding the red flags and signs of grooming. Within a victim, it can portray itself like withdrawal, secrecy, inappropriate knowledge. These are the signs that you would see in a victim that is either starting to be groomed or has been groomed. Spending excessive time online, especially at night, or on their phone, hiding screens, and quickly switching apps when approached, maybe deleting their text messages, maybe deleting phone records, receiving gifts or money from unknown sources, mood swings, depression, or withdrawal from family. Now, this can be a variety of issues. Mood swings can pertain to bullying, but it can also pertain to a child being groomed. Depression, withdrawal, these are all signs that parents, community members, teachers, faith leaders need to be aware of as it presents itself within a victim. Red flags and signs within a groomer or a predator would be over-involvement, crossing boundaries. You start to notice gifts and secrecy, shame, guilt, and silence. But these are behaviors within a predator that is grooming somebody, and that would give a red flag as far as over-involvement and crossing boundaries and over-comfortability. Here are just a few examples of grooming that has led to arrests within the past year. And if you type in and do a Google search, many of them will come up. And 90% of them are examples of grooming situations that have led to sexual assault and molestation. An example, Michelle Little, 29, Sarasota Military Academy High School teacher, made out with a 17-year-old student, faces felony charges of indecent, lewd, and lascivious touching. And these were before the grooming bill was passed. Eric Rodriguez, Oasis High School volunteer coach, reported for sending sexually explicit text messages and nude photos showing his face to a student, being charged with indecent, lewd, or lascivious touching of minors, transmission of harmful materials to a minor, and soliciting a child for unlawful sexual conduct. David Bunn, social media. Man met the teen on social media and used a ride-sharing service to bring her to his Northport home. Team told police that she had been drugged, sexually battered, and was not allowed to leave Bunn's home. He was arrested on 3 charges, including sexual battery on a child, interfering with the custody of a minor, and kidnapping. A big example of grooming, and grooming not only the children, but also the adults in the community, would be that of James Bart Dixon. He once held the position of president of Northport Mustangs Football Association. He was convicted of 1 count of lewd and lascivious molestation upon a child under the age of 12 and 2 counts of lewd and lascivious conduct upon a child under the age of 16. The quote is, "The evidence at trial showed that the defendant used his position of trust to abuse multiple generations of the same family. As a former president of the Northport Mustangs football and cheer organization, he inserted himself into his family by providing financial and emotional support, not just to the victims, but to their parents as well. Once he established himself as a trusted member of the family, he slowly groomed the victims and tested their boundaries to see exactly how much he could get away with before they disclosed the abuse. One of the most notorious cases of this was that of Larry Nassar. For those that may not know who he is, although he is a very infamous person, he was the American former medicine physician and serial child molester. From 1996 to 2014, he was the team doctor of the U.S. Women's National Gymnastics League, and he was part of the largest sexual abuse scandal in sports history. In 2016, he was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting at least 265 young women and girls under the guise of medical treatment. In May 2017, the victim impact statements described Nassar's modus operandi. Sexual assaults began after having gained a girl's trust and friendship. There are quotes from the community that explicitly said most people don't understand the grooming process that predators go through, and Larry was a master groomer. He groomed the entire community. There are 6 primary reasons when examining Larry Nassar's case and abusers like him and how they were able to avoid detection. One of the biggest reasons is that they have a position of respect and trust in their community. They target people who have less power than them. Again, it's that dynamic of a coach to an athlete, an adult to a minor. In this case, the institutions did cover up the abuse. So there are cases where institutions have an ability to stop a action like this early on. And when institutions aren't aligned on policies like this, then it ends up resulting in a Nassar situation. They strategically groom their targets. They defy the stereotype of a predator and a monster. That one is a large one. A lot of adults have an idea of what a predator looks like. A predator doesn't look like anything specific. It defies all racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, gender stereotypes. And that is how predators and monsters are able to navigate these stereotypes. And they often leverage misconceptions and misinformation. Some of the things that we can do for prevention and protection strategies for parents and guardians, tips would be to keep an open, age-appropriate communication, monitor devices and online activity, create an environment where your kids feel safe coming to you to talk about anything, even with uncomfortable stuff. Use everyday moments to talk about body safety, consent, and digital responsibility. Regularly check their devices, their apps, and messages, not as a gotcha, but as a part of open accountability. Set firm but loving boundaries, no secrets from parents, limit alone time with adults, and teach the difference between safe and unsafe touch. Revisit these conversations regularly, not just a one-time talk. A solid moral foundation helps these children resist manipulation. This can emphasize worth, boundaries, accountability, and the courage to speak up. Help kids understand right from wrong through both values and critical thinking, not just blind trust. and reinforce intuition as a tool. If something feels wrong, it likely is. Give the child a permission to listen to that voice and act on it. Community and school role. Implement prevention education in schools, establish safe reporting channels, and train staff and volunteers to recognize red flags. I am going to go into a personal example of a grooming situation that has touched on a variety of the subjects we covered today. Through the grooming bill, I had met a mother. Her name is Michelle Peterson. Her son was sexually groomed by a teacher and who was also a baseball coach. This started out when her son was 15 years old. Michelle was active in her community. She was in the medical field. She was also associated with the school. She also coached softball, and she was a very involved parent. At the age of 15, her son had started communicating with this teacher and coach, and it started out about a bullying incident on the baseball field. And that was how her son, Andrew, became vulnerable to this situation. After a few weeks and months, what started out as texting, what started out as side conversations, what started out as phone calls, started leading to a more consistent communication pattern. It started leading to changes in behavior. It started leading to changes in mood. And Michelle wasn't really clear as to what was causing these changes. Wasn't clear if it was something having to do with the stress of school, the stress of girls, possible bullying situation. But she was a very attentive parent. She checked her child's phone. She had conversations with her son, and she was very aware of what was going on at school. One night, she overheard her son on the phone and sounded very upset and was saying that he would come grab those paintballs from his classroom tomorrow and that he can't keep having these conversations. He's busy with school. And she overheard this and decided to go look at the phone bill. When she had identified that there was a phone number on there where numerous calls and texts had been exchanged, she had called out that to her son, and her son admitted that it was a teacher within her son's school. There were over 6,000 text messages that were exchanged in this 6-month period. And upon further review and upon acquiring the transcripts of the text messages and phone calls, she was able to determine that a grooming situation had gone on, and later found out that there was an offer for money in exchange for a video of her son. They were able to take this into law enforcement. Law enforcement investigated, and after a very long investigatory process, this man was arrested and charged with grooming. However, this is one example of many that had been previously highlighted, of many that had been where there was that imbalance of power, that lack of understanding between a parent and identifying what could be a grooming behavior. But Michelle acted early enough, and she was able to notice signs early enough before sexual assault occurred. And that is why prevention and protection strategies are really important for not only parents and guardians, but the entire community to identify these behaviors early on. One of the key things in prevention and protection of this crime is trusting your instincts. If something feels off, pay attention. Whether it is you that feel that you're being groomed or you as an observer that someone may be being groomed, pay attention and trust those instincts. Groomers often rely on others dismissing their behavior as harmless or just being nice, and you don't need to be 100% sure to take action. Number two, document what you see. Write down the dates, times, and descriptions of that concerning behavior. Note the patterns, like isolating a child, boundary violations, secretive behavior, excessive gifts, or overly personal conversations. Documentation helps build a case and is critical if authorities get involved. Number three, talk to the child if appropriate. Now, this could be the parent and or guardian, or it could be a concerned adult. However, in this circumstance, there's always a opportunity to reach out to the parent and or guardian to make sure that they are aware and include them in this conversation. Use age appropriate, open-ended questions. Avoid leading or pressuring them. Examples: has blank ever made you feel uncomfortable? Do you have any secrets with blank? How do you feel when you're around blank? These are also very good questions for parents to have with their children so that they have this open communication pathway with their child. Set boundaries immediately. Limit or stop the adult's access to that child. Do not allow unsupervised time. If you're in a leadership or authority role, consider reassigning roles or creating oversight structures. And lastly, if you are concerned about a situation of grooming and or sexual misconduct, report it. If you're seeing grooming behaviors, report your concerns to law enforcement, child protective services, the organization involved, school, church, sports team. And there's also the National Child Abuse Hotline. You don't have to investigate it. It's not your job. Your responsibility is to report and let the trained professionals handle the next steps. And that is it.
Thank you, Allie. That was wonderful. A lot of great information. The one thing that stuck out to me was there are a lot of broken children in the world. And I feel like it's just it's an easy in for those children who, like you said on that one slide, if they don't have food, if they don't have shelter, if they don't, those basic needs, those basic physical needs, to provide those and get your little grips in them, and even emotional needs of the at the higher level. I just feel like it's going to be a hard road to watch all of that and to stop all of that. And we've been listening to you talk about human trafficking and now grooming today and sextortion and all of those things for a few weeks now, and I just can't help but wonder about I always I always think about, now I'm always wondering, like I see men out in the world and I have this thought in my head about how how many predators are there, and is there an extensive amount of predators in the world that we're trying to fight against, and how did that happen? Why is that happening, and why do we have so many predators against children in the world when it comes to grooming for sexual needs and desires and fulfillments?
Well, that's a great question, Teresa. The one thing I do want to highlight is that while it can seem that it's more prevalent with adults being predators, there are also female predators as well. We are seeing a rise in female predators as it relates to preying on children. I don't know if that's related to the fact that boys are less likely to report. So whether they're the predator that is preying on a boy is a male or a female, boys are inherently less likely to report. We are seeing a rise in grooming behavior, predatory behavior. There's a number of things that contribute to that, much like the sextortion thing. There is an over sexualization of society in general, with our young children especially, but society in general. When you get a generation or numerous generations where it's hypersexualized and there's pornography easily available and ready and free and accessible, it starts to create a demand. It starts to create a desire for more, almost like a drug dealer giving a sample of drugs and then leaving that person wanting more. There is a study that has said once a predator watches material with a children, it does chemically change something in their brain, so that once that switch is flicked, you can't undo that. You can't undo that chemical change in your brain when you see child sexual abuse material. And a lot of times that comes into play. One of the things that does also come into play that isn't as widely discussed is that generational and familial grooming and sexual assault. Those that have been groomed and sexually assaulted, it makes them more vulnerable to also exhibiting those behaviors in the future.
Mhm.
So there are just a number of reasons why this has been amplified. But a lot of it has to do with technology. It has to do with pornography. It has to do with over sexualization of society, less stringent boundaries, and I think just the ability to interact with predators and victims more easily.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I didn't know if you saw my note over there that I was a competitive gymnast when I
Oh,
was
wow.
younger, and when the Larry Nasser story broke, I was shook to the core, as well as all of my teammates that and the gymnast thing is also, there's been conversations after that happened with a group of ex gymnasts and the gymnasts that I used to coach, and I was part of the gymnastics world for a long time. Um, is they're little leotards that they wear, and if you see like our college age and our elite gymnasts that go on to the Olympics and they compete in different venue the competing is different venues, it's hardly covering anything anymore. And that also, there was just discussion at one point that we need to put shorts, even if they're spandex shorts, on our gymnasts over the top of their Leos, so that they are more covered. And so it's not, I mean, their butt cheeks are hanging out and, all of that. So that was a discussion that I was a part of just as a coach, gymnastics in the gymnastics world, when that story broke, which was just a couple of years ago, and I was pulled in as an ex-coach at the gymnastics place in my town, and talked about that. Do we cover up? Do we start covering up our little gymnasts so that their little bits and parts aren't kind of on display as in in that in that sport, and
Yeah.
maybe that would curb some of that. I don't know. I mean, I would guess that there's probably predators watching gymnastics, and I mean, who knows? I don't know. But anyway, it was a discussion that we had all together. And right now, the gymnasts don't want to wear shorts. The gymnasts are against it. They want to wear their little Leos. And so we're battle. It's an uphill battle to figure out. I know that there was one country that they came in full body. So it was tanked, it was a tank top, but it was long pants all the way down. And there was side talk that they were getting docked points for it by the judges. So there's a whole, it's just a whole mess of things. But, you know, that's just my take on the gymnastics thing, and being an ex-gymnast and being an ex-coach, and knowing that the little, how small and tiny their little leotards are, and what it covers and what it doesn't cover.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an excellent point. I used to be a competitive cheerleader. We have many of the same outfits. If you're in competitive dance, you have to deal with those outfits. However, I mean, you could be in volleyball
Yeah,
and there, you know, volleyball or
any of
um
those.
any we've noticed that any positions where there is a desire for more competitive sports, more competitive music, more competitive opportunities, where parents are looking at careers for their children, and they're, you know, excited, and children are looking for opportunities to exceed um, standards, and so when a coach takes interest, that may or may not raise a red flag, because that desire to excel in that sport, or in that, you know, music field or entertainment, you're getting that focused attention of someone that could propel your career in that field. So just like we had said, establishing those healthy boundaries, making sure that no matter what happens, that communication is there, that that victim will be supported, that victim can come to a trusted adult, understanding that there are certain boundaries, certain levels of conversation that are inappropriate. And with the legislation, it was really important for our lawmakers to understand that there's protections in the workplace for adults from sexual harassment from other adults. But when I had related that there weren't that same protections for children, and they are more vulnerable than adult to adult interaction, what protections exist for them? So the need was really important to have these protections in place, but not just that, but start the conversation on what grooming was, and remove the politicalization of the term, because anyone can be groomed from any side of the aisle, from any side of the community or the state or the country, and just understanding that it is a issue that exists, and we need to address it.
Yeah, I actually appreciate that you extended it beyond schools, because many years ago I belonged to a church which my children did not like going there. And I wasn't comfortable because of all the women must keep silence in the church stuff. But it elected elders and deacons democratically. And I'm all for democracy, but not democracy in ignorance. I'll put it that way. And I don't think that the people in that congregation had a clue what they were getting into, because after I left, it turned out that someone that they had elected as an elder, who makes all the decisions, was found guilty of soliciting sex from a minor who turned out to be an FBI agent. You know where I'm going with this. And that several deacons had molested their children, and it just, it all fell. And so, but when you talk to them, it's like, oh, he wouldn't do that. He's such a nice guy. And they were just sort of oblivious that nice guy doesn't, I mean, actually is one of the characteristics of a predator. But it got worse, because once you're an elder or a deacon in your community, in your church, then the community puts you on boards for sports, for camps, for whatever. And so one legitimizes the other. Does that make sense? So now I'm a parish nurse of an Episcopal parish. We train everybody. We call it safe spaces. It's mandatory training every 3 years, and we all have to have it. And it trains everybody to be aware of this grooming everywhere. But we're not allowed to be alone with the it can't even be me and my husband. If a child wants to go to the bathroom, it has to be me and someone who's not related to me escorting him to the bathroom, that kind of thing. Can't be in a car alone, all of those things, because we've learned. And I think what we need is an educated democracy. Can I say that? So hats off that you've got the law, but I think we also need to educate our democracy, right?
Exactly. I mean, you bring up a valid point. So not only do parents and guardians need to be aware of their making sure that their children um, develop that discernment to not be alone with an adult, but the adults also taking that responsibility and that extra step to not be alone with a child. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it leads to, you know, it has nefarious intent. It's also to protect that adult from anything. When you have a meeting with a child, make sure there's two people in the room. Make sure that there, if possible, have an open door meeting, or that there's a camera in the room recording, so that everyone is comfortable and feels safe. But when we have these conversations, when grooming is still going on today, and that's aside from the online grooming, the in-person grooming that's going on, and it's still going on, and it's still prevalent with teachers, coaches, faith leaders, community leaders, like a groomer, all it takes is someone in a position of perceived trust or authority. And that's all it takes. Um, in Iowa, that's where we also got the bill passed. It's passed in Arizona, and a bill also exists in Georgia now. There's a couple other states that I believe also have it now, but Iowa also has used the bill and has started to be able to intervene earlier before sexual assault. Now, there is trauma that is still left behind when a child has been groomed. However, it is in a better place to deal with that than to deal with after a child has been sexually assaulted.
Well, once again, a great and wonderful presentation by Allie Hopper. Next, she has one more left. I wish she had 10 more. I'm learning so much in the series that I never thought that just the information that I have, and being around young children, and just how to, like you said, protect myself, protect them from any nefarious situations that might come up. She has her final one though. I hope that we can have her back again. I think it's important to continue to spread this message. But her final one is April 22nd, and it's on the different forms of human trafficking. So there's, you know, when I think that's going to be such a vital presentation, because most people, when they think of human trafficking, they think of one path, right? Instead of the many paths that it may take. So I'm excited for that one, and that is on April 22nd. You will get reminders for that as well. And we look forward to seeing you back here again. And everyone that attended today and that's watching the recording, thank you so much for participating.
Stay safe, everybody, and keep our community safe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.